So the real important thing you need to know about me first is that I live here in Takoma Park. I'm a neighbor, and I just came from the Takoma Park Elementary School Parents v. Staff basketball game. And I can report that at halftime, the parents were beating the teachers by 1 point.
Yay!
So in my introductory presentation, I really want to get across 3 or 4 points. The first of which being, as bad as what was passed in the NDAA is, it is a symptom of a much deeper problem, which is going to keep coming back and back and back in Congress until there's a firm bipartisan message sent that the American people don't want any more of these laws and regulations and is thinking about the way we engage in the world. Second point is there's actually an amazing coalition of people who are made deeply uncomfortable by these provisions. You're going to be made very uncomfortable by who some of your fellow coalition members are on this, but that's a good thing. And the third point is there are things happening literally right now in the next month that make this a really opportune moment for both national level activism and, frankly, local level activism, which is what's been missing in a lot of ways on this cause for the last 4 years. So what I want to start with is what were the people who started this actually trying to achieve? And they had 4 or 5 goals, which are not at all obvious from the sort of weird, convoluted language that finally came out in law. And their first goal, actually Senator Lindsey Graham said very explicitly on the floor of the Senate, he said, the homeland is the battlefield. That these people either genuinely believe or find it convenient to suggest that terrorism should be understood as a threat here at home as much as any place else around the world. That has the further implication that everything that they have succeeded in putting into law and practice over the last 10 years about what our military and law enforcement and intelligence agencies are allowed to do outside the U.S., they should also be allowed to do inside the U.S. And again, Lindsey Graham and Joe Lieberman were shockingly explicit about that on the floor of the Senate while this bill was under debate. There's also, and this provision was in the original version of the bill in the House, and it was fortunately stripped out, but it's going to come back, the idea of extending the authorization for use of military force, the AUMF, and actually broadening it, if it wasn't broad enough already, so to get rid of the idea that it's restricted to areas where Al-Qaeda is clearly operating. So that has obvious long-term implications that would make many of us uncomfortable, and that was explicit in the original legislation. A third goal of the folks who were introducing and pushing this resolution was to militarize our justice system when it comes to people that we actually apprehend on terrorism-related suspicions or offenses. And again, here, some members of Congress have been very explicit. They don't believe anyone should be tried on terrorist offenses in a civilian court. Now, we'll just pause for a minute and say that that's really bizarre because civilian courts actually have higher conviction rates and hand down longer sentences than military tribunals do. And it places human rights advocates in a very awkward position of having to jump around and say, hey, civilian courts are really great because they sentence terrorists to solitary confinement for the rest of their lives. Isn't that fabulous? But it's very, I've worked on this a long time now and I can't really explain it, but there is this conviction that somehow using our criminal justice system, using the protections of our Constitution somehow gives terrorists rights, and we don't want to give terrorists rights. So that was an explicit goal behind this legislation. And then the last goal is to really create, to keep drawing a line and keep chipping away at the idea that, that we all have the same rights and protections. And to really create, and again, you can get people to say this explicitly without too much difficulty, that there's our constitutional structure, and then there's terrorist-related offenses to which the constitutional protections don't apply. And you actually say, well, terrorism is different, 9/11 was different. If you push a little harder, unfortunately, there's some ethnic and national characteristics associated with that too. at this point, curiously, you don't ever hear people advocating military tribunals for white supremacist terrorists, for example. So when you look at what actually passed, it's really important to back up and say these are watered down sort of remnants of this bigger agenda which hasn't gone away, and whose backers are very, very clear about it not having gone away. Now, how did they get watered down and how are they being implemented is the next question. And interesting thing that happened is that there were a few very brave voices, particularly in the Senate. Senator Udall from Colorado was actually the only senator to vote against the bill in committee. And then Senator Feinstein was very good in insisting that some provisions be watered down for a while. Senator Reid refused to bring the bill to the floor, then he kind of caved after a while. And a lot of senators, frankly, decided that because these provisions were stuck into the bill that funds our military for the year, and that because it had a lot of other, it doesn't touch with the authorization, that sets out the funding level, and it's been passed every year forever, and Chairman Levin felt that it would be a personal blemish on him if the bill didn't get passed, regardless of what was in it. Pat Leahy, for example, from Vermont, who I think of as a civil rights champion, decided that because the bill had some things he had worked on very hard about the National Guard, that he would vote for it even though he didn't like the provisions that were in there. So it's interesting and it's important to understand that nobody in the Senate thought that what was in this bill was earth-shattering enough to actually stand up and fight for it in the end, except Senator Udall. And this brings me to my sort of most fundamental critique of this, which is nobody can agree on what these provisions actually do. The people who supported them don't agree on what they do. People who oppose them don't agree on what they do. Do they allow the indefinite detention of American citizens, as was said in the introduction? Some people say no, they don't. The next thing to point out is that the administration issued a signing statement and then implementing regulations, which basically said, we're going to ignore these, and we're going to go ahead and do what we would do anyway. So, of course, that's good news, but those are only executive orders, and they have no force of law, and they're only good insofar as you trust this administration, and they have no weight whatsoever on any subsequent administration, whereas the original provisions, of course, have the force of law. Now, despite what I've just said about Congress pretty dismally failing to stand up on this issue, and I should note that unfortunately both of Maryland's senators did vote for this, although I'm happy to say that Chris Van Hollen voted against it, there was a surprising coalition, even before the bills passed, opposing it very vocally. And this is where I'm going to surprise you a little bit about who the loudest voices in opposition to this bill were. It was the US military, the FBI, the CIA, and the Justice Department. Secretary Panetta went on the record saying, we don't want this authority. 20-some retired generals went on the record saying the US military does not want to be a police department. The FBI said, we don't want the military taking suspects out of our hands. The CIA said we'd prefer suspects to go to civilian trial. 2 retired 4-star Marine generals wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying these laws trample on our values, and our values are one of our most primary national security assets. So it continues to shock and amaze me that you had literally you had nobody in the American national security establishment saying that this bill was a good idea, and it passed anyway. You also haven't heard anybody from the security establishment complaining that it's not going to be implemented. Now, who you have heard complaining that it's not going to be implemented is Senator Graham, Senator McCain, who are now actually holding up all high-level appointments to the Defense Department on the grounds that the administration is not implementing the bill the way they want the administration to, so welcome to politics. The interesting thing that's happened since the bill, and the other thing that I should say is that although all of you in the room are hardcore civil rights devotees and you all probably knew about this bill before it was passed, most people did not know about this bill before it was passed. And in retrospect, we in the, I won't say we, Shahid, because you were probably out trying to educate people about it before it passed, Many groups made a mistake by making this an inside battle and frankly, thinking nobody would ever learn all these acronyms, and we did not try to get large amounts of public support during the negotiations over the bill at the end of last year, which clearly was a mistake because lo and behold, the minute it got out to the press what had been done, there were suddenly screams of outrage from the left and from the right. And Shahid will say more about the community active organizing that's been going on around the country. But again, one of the fascinating things that's happening is that conservative libertarians have really seized on this issue. And that the first 2 states that have passed statewide resolutions criticizing or rejecting the NDAA, a lot of the heavy lifting was done by conservative groups. And frankly, by some groups that I'm not thrilled about being in coalition with in some cases, I have to say. But it's a really interesting sign that people are very willing to think seriously about civil liberties and about how this whole superstructure of terrorism and how we respond to terrorism and how we fight a war against it infringes on the lives of citizens and residents of this country and on the lives of civilians in general. So, last point, why now? Why does this matter? In the next 2 weeks, the Senate is going to mark up this year's version of this bill. The House may go as soon as next week. And there are a number of different bills moving, trying to change, clarify, repeal, or totally obfuscate, in at least one case, these provisions. It's actually interesting. The guy in the House who wants to expand the AUMF so that it covers any time the military wants to do anything to anybody anywhere has, Shahid will tell you I'm not exaggerating. His name is Buck McKeon. He's the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. He has actually introduced a bill which purports to clarify the NDAA while not changing anything in it, which is a really good trick. If only I had gotten a law degree, I would be able to do that too. Ron Paul has introduced a bill that would just flat out repeal the provisions. Justin Amash, who is a libertarian Republican from Western Michigan, is in negotiations with Adam Smith, who is a moderate Democrat from Washington State, about how to put together a bill that would actually make it clear that civilians apprehended on U.S. soil are not subject to indefinite detention period. So there's a lot happening. But as I said, you have to remember how lopsided that vote was last year. And the reason that vote was lopsided was that you had a lot of members of Congress who were scared of what the media would do to them, and they were scared of taking any vote that could be pictured as being weak on terrorism. 10 years after 9/11, this is a moment to finally communicate to members of Congress that there are other things that the American public cares about that be perceived as weak on terrorism. And we finally reached the moment where we can have that conversation, and it would be great if this were the issue before we get to the fight about can we make the AUMF global, or before we get to the fight about is America the battlefield, as he said, is the homeland the battlefield. This is as good a place as any, and frankly, it's a late place already to make this stop and to say, no, we're actually ready to have a normal society that lives under constitutional rules again. So that's the national picture. Now, why do something at the local level? As I said, I was shocked and dismayed to see senators from a state like Maryland where nobody's going to punish them for a national security vote. Nobody's going to vote against Ben Cardin because of this issue. So again, why did, and Barbara Mikulski, for heaven's sake.
Can I just clarify that? He voted no.
Are you sure?
Positive, because we thanked him at our
Did you?
Congress.
I had my staff look it up.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I'm happy. If
Yeah, I hated thanking him, but I thanked him. And Mikulski actually said she voted no because of the issue you stated. She didn't want to vote against the military.
Right, but
yeah,
you
Cardin
had
voted no, so that's a big deal.
You had 4-star generals begging people to vote no because of military funding. So
right.
What could you do? So how can you send a message? How can, I mean, if you aren't safe to vote on these issues in Maryland, where are you safe to vote on these issues? So this is really, and yet we have found on all the issues I work on, and it's very, very hard to get federal legislators' attention on national security issues because they think that we don't care. They are convinced the only thing we care about is being safe, and that all these votes are freebies except for, as Montgomery County knows painfully well, if there are corporate interests involved, they're not freebies, and if the media will go after them for being weak on terrorism, they're not freebies. So this is really a chance at the local level to find every creative way we have to say, hey, federal legislators, if you all will actually step up and do what we know you know is right in the first place, you will not be punished for it. And that's why I'm actually really, really happy to be doing work at the local level, because I literally think this is more important than talking to members of Congress right now, because they all know. They've all read all the position papers, they've read all the outcry, but they don't know is whether they're safe to do what they know is right, and that only voters can tell them. So with that, turn it over to Shahid.